Hey guys, Youngblood with you, and today I wanted to talk about the Electronic Warfare article that we had released and what that actually means that we can expect from the gameplay. Now, this mechanic was something that I initially thought sounded kind of boring, but now I'm kind of envisioning this, kind of interesting arms race between offensive and defensive electronic warfare, basically the weapons and defenses. So, I don't know. It just seems to kind of add a lot to the dynamics of battle, and especially like the ambushes that we can maybe see, hidden around derelicts or in the maybe asteroid fields out in space. But we'll get into all of that. One of the first things that I noticed when reading this article was them talking about the Hornet tracker. Now, I think we've been wanting and kind of waiting on the Herald, and now we've got the new Sentinel, the Vanguard variant that was just released. And we're pretty sure there's an Avenger Ewarfare variant coming out as well, but the tracker is something I always looked at in a different way. Now, this could mean that other ships mentioned might be kind of good at what the tracker can do, or it might mean that it's capable of electronic warfare, but maybe just a little bit worse than the ones that we know were sold as electronic warfare ships, but who knows? But let's go ahead and throw it in the Ewarfare pile because it was mentioned, and after seeing how they plan on implementing all of this, I can kind of see why. Now, before we get into the true E-Warfare, they do start talking about the different types of signals that you put off and how your ship signature can have a pretty big impact on a lot of things. Now, we've known about the different types of signatures, such as infrared, which comes from the part of your ships that generate heat. So think about weapons, thrusters, etc. They all generate heat, and that ends up resulting in things like IR missiles being able to track you as well. It could also cause you to be picked up from further away as far as like scanning goes. Now, the next signature type is EM, or Electromagnetic Signature, and this is generated from the parts of your ship that consume power, so shields, energy weapons, power plants. These are all going to be the big dogs when it comes to outputting your EM signature. Now, we all know that there's missiles that utilize EM tracking, but there's also EMF detectors, and that, I assume, one could use to kind of find enemies in the darkness. The third type of signature is the cross-section of your ship, and this just works like today's radar does. Basically, the larger your ship, the more likely you're going to be picked up by standard sensors, and just like today, if you want to avoid detection, there's stealth armors and maybe paints that you can apply to kind of help minimize your cross-section. Now, keep in mind though, everything has a trade-off, and your stealth likely comes with less HP overall. The last signature type is a newer one, and that's the unique ship signature, which is generated by a small transponder that broadcasts your ship's identity number along with your information as the pilot. Now, if you don't want to have your identity known, there's ways around it, like having someone hack it and make it a display like something else. So maybe instead of STLYoungblood, I come across as Bill Johnson. Yeah, something like that doesn't sound easy to do, but it can be done, and it may end up being like a new career for people that want to kind of trade in the seedy underbelly of the world. Now, it was interesting to see that the UEE mandates that everyone has to maintain at least a minimum level of signature for all of these. So IR, EM, cross-section, and if you don't, you're basically driving without a license plate or your headlights off, or maybe like a boat without an identifier number on it. If you're caught, you're likely going to face a fine of some sort, and who knows, you may end up being attacked. But if you're good enough, though, you might be missed altogether. So either way, just from my perspective, if I happen to notice somebody that's lurking with all their systems off, chances are I'm labeling you as a threat pretty much immediately. Now, let's go ahead and jump into the more exciting stuff, and that's the warfare portion of the article, since we've mostly been talking about scanning and signatures to this point. Now, since the old saying goes, a good offense is a good defense, we're going to go ahead and start with the offensive side of the game. Now, there's several different tools at your disposal to attack your targets with, and we're going to go ahead and start off with the good old EMP. And we've seen EMPs in other games, and the general idea is the same. The EMP is going to cause immediate disruption to the enemy ship by overloading the power pipes, which then overload and cause the ship to restart their computer systems. Now, it's not like you've seen in movies, though. It's not just a simple across-the-board impact. The more severe the hit, the longer the ship is going to be down without their systems. Now, how that EMP is delivered, we'll have to see, but it could maybe be based on the proximity of your ship. Maybe if it's a subsystem, maybe you've got the ability to aim it, or maybe if it's a missile, it's how closely your EMP missile explodes. Next up is a really awesome option, and that's the data spike missile. And these little badasses are actually going to act like a harpoon, attaching itself to the enemy's ship, and it gives you a direct link to their computer systems and affords you the chance to try and shut down the systems that you want. Now, this means that if you want to kill their engines, you could try to do that. Engines and shields, sure, go for it. Or maybe you don't want them firing back or running, but you can only shut down one thing, then going for their cooling pipes, their cooling systems is a good option. Now, I assume this is going to end up being a skill-based task, meaning the better you are at hacking mechanic, or maybe the better you are at landing that on the right spot of the ship, the more systems you can end up taking down with that missile. We're going to have to see, though. Next up is Distortion, and this disrupts the power flow to the ship's components. So think about the cannons we've seen in-game like the Jokers, and we should be able to kind of temporarily reduce the amount of power that a ship can generate and get to the ship's parts. So for a cop, a pirate, maybe a bounty hunter, these shots can cause significant amount of problems for the enemy, and with enough shots we can completely overload the system and halt the flow of power to the ship's parts. So if you only get a few shots on target, the ship can eventually flush out the problems, but how much is needed is likely going to be dependent on a lot of factors. Those are what I would really call the more offensive E-War options, but there are two others that were mentioned by CIG that kind of fall into this same category. Signal interception is a passive form of electronic warfare gameplay, and it's about interfering with an enemy's communications or scanning abilities. So while you're not actually causing damage or doing a lot of, just a whole lot to the ship, you can wreak havoc on their ability to track targets, communicate with allies, or just really any other deeds you're up to. You can also add on special equipment like antennas or custom avionics to help with the storage and decryption of transmissions. Now, I think this is something we'll see on the Herald and is just an additional suite of equipment to kind of help you hold and transport that data that you end up stealing. Now, on the defensive side of electronic warfare, we have some options to help protect you from these issues. Now, most of these are already in-game and have other purposes, but they do impact the enemy's effectiveness. For example, the EM flare can help break the lock of an EM missile that's coming for you, which is probably to be expected. But they can also be utilized to break the lock of a data spike missile or another missile tracking your EM signature. Now that alone is kind of boring, but it is important. Now they mention that you can use this to help you mask the launch of your own offensive weaponry as well. So if you're launching a data spike, you could also pop off an EM flare to hide that launch. And while that's more offensive, that's okay. It kind of falls into that area, and who knows, it may end up helping mask that altogether, allowing you to actually land that missile. We also have Heat Chaff, which again is primarily designed to avoid missiles in a larger area than the flare does. So for missiles like the Rattler, it kind of prevents more locks than otherwise a flare would. Now, they really don't talk much about how this defends against incoming data attacks, but I'm assuming there is a purpose in there somewhere. Now, more specific to data, there is a data chaff, and this helps to defend against the E-Warfare attacks and makes it challenging for the attacker to maintain their lock on your systems. And finally, we have the Decoy Missile, which are my favorite of this group, and these are missiles that can send signals to mislead your enemy. So, for example, you could launch one from your Herald that makes it look like you're actually a Cutlass. Now, with that being said, this isn't going to confuse a cross-section scan, but if they are only looking for signature type, you could confuse somebody. Now, keep in mind that by default, it's going to mirror your ship, so it's really just going to look like another Herald in the situation I just mentioned above, but that has some utility in itself. Maybe you're being chased or engaged by an enemy, you launch a decoy, you end up killing your power and go completely dark, and maybe depending on their distance, they're more likely to follow that missile signature than actually following the path of your ship. That's a pretty nice little tool. Now, they mention that the more advanced of you out there, you guys that are going to probably be diving into this really deep, can end up making the missile look like another ship, but that's not going to be easy, at least according to them. But if you can end up mastering that, just think about jumping in, dropping 3 of these things that look like bigger ships, scare away scavengers from a derelict ship that you actually want to capture, and then the prize is yours. So there's a lot of possibilities with this component of the gameplay, and I'm pretty excited about it. And the last thing they brought up in this article was talking about scan shielding, and this is mostly about how you can protect yourself and your cargo from being identified. So for example, you can either make hull modifications, which is going to limit your cross-section scan, or your shields, which either protect the specific area of your ship from scanning, like your illegal cargo, or potentially just the whole damn ship. You can also have a smuggling module inside the ship, like the little room in the cockpit on the Taurus, and you can hide cargo in there. So this opens up the smuggling piece of the game as well, and I think it's going to give a lot of people that Han Solo experience that they really want. Now, are you able to tell if somebody is shielding part of their ship? I'm going to go ahead and guess yes. There's probably going to be a dark area on the scan, but we don't really know without more information. And then past that, what sort of scrutiny that ends up getting you from the UEE or the police in the area? So the article wraps up talking about how the tracker's already in-game, but the Vanguard and Herald are coming in the not-too-distant future. So new ships to fly is always a good thing. New game mechanics in place are even better. So outside of that, you've been watching footage of the social module in the background. I'm going to be doing an impression video on that later in the week. Don't forget we're doing 2 giveaways of Aurora packages. One's currently in place, and there's going to be another one later in the week that's only for subscribers. So until then, if you guys have questions or thoughts on any of this, put it in the comments. Stay tuned for that content I just mentioned, and I'll catch you guys later. Take care.